I try and watch as much as possible. Go to the cinema as much as I can, which I find is a really different environment to watching stuff than watching stuff on TV. Not to say that's necessarily bad, but I'm more receptive to the craft, I guess. You're less distracted, so it's just a good way to kind of look at stuff in a more analytical way. It's normally the mark of a film that I really like if I'm not thinking about the editing of it, and I'm just totally forget about that in 5 minutes and I'm with the story. It's normally a film that I'll remember for much longer than one that I'm really focusing on how they put it together. All of Joe Walker's films are great. He's a British editor who now works with Steve McQueen and Denis Villeneuve, who is a fantastic editor and also just has a real range of styles. He doesn't, it's not like, oh, that's obviously a Joe Walker film, apart from the fact that they're always just like beautifully edited. So I really rate his stuff. I just watched The Passenger, that Antonioni film, which is like an old Italian film. Some of that old European stuff is great. It really, is a different approach to cutting, which would never. I feel like it would be really hard to cut stuff in that way now, but you can totally use their approach to films and kind of like apply it to a more modern sensibility, I guess. Oh, and also Cold War. I thought it was an amazing film, and also on the surface looks quite simply edited, but you realise that he's done a lot of that in the writing, which is they're kind of the two sides of the same coin, like the writing and the editing, and I think it's always a real testament when you see a quite stark film in terms of like it hasn't been put together in the edit. They haven't just shot a load of stuff and then kind of found the film in the edit. I'm almost more impressed by stuff where they've had a very singular idea of like how the film is going to be made right from the script stage and done a lot of that process then. I was really impressed by that for doing that. And Lynn Ramsey does the same thing, actually. She used to be a photographer and does a lot of her editing before. A scene might only have 4 shots in it, but those 4 shots are the right 4 shots to tell the story. So it's a real sparse filmmaking. So I've just talked about Joe Walker. Definitely he's an inspiration. And he's cut docs and fiction, which I think is something I'm going to try and do as well. I think it's really good way of... it's all storytelling, and the great thing about documentary is that you've got more of a writer contribution to the project because there's no script, and you're kind of finding the film in the rushes. So that collaboration between editor and director is a slightly different role in documentary editing. So I'm always really appreciate editors that have done both. I think it always makes their fiction cutting better if they've been documentary editors. It's the same with Joe Beanie, who cut Lynn Ramsey's film, and he did all of Werner Herzog's films for the last kind of 30 years, and he does Andrea Arnold's films as well, and he really brings a writer's sensibility to editing. So it's goes beyond kind of putting together scenes and making stuff stylistically very slick. He's a real collaborator in the cutting room, and it was great to work with him. So obviously Walter Murch is inspiration for all. He's very good at talking about the craft in a way that I think not many other editors are. So he's a great resource for kind of like, I guess,
very intelligent man, isn't
just super intelligent and just like obsessed with loads of other different things. He's a cool guy. There's kind of overt sexism, which I've fortunately not seen a huge amount of, and then I guess there's all the small things that you take for granted as a guy, which is very easy to kind of like minimize and forget about, it's quite hard to know where one starts and the other ends, but I think a lot of you take for granted the self-belief and maybe the confidence that you get in certain work environments that come from your background, like be that your race or your gender or your class. So I think I've definitely benefited massively from all three of those things, just from a kind of like a soft level, I guess it entirely forms who you are as a person, and it's quite hard to know what those contributions had, but yeah, I think I definitely wouldn't be in this situation. I would have had more challenges, if I'd come from another background, I think. Yeah. I think it's changing, definitely. I've seen on Baghdad Central was a film set in Iraq, shot in Morocco, but with a primary Middle Eastern cast. And I really noticed on that more than other shows that I've worked on that there's a lot of dialogue at the start of a show when they're in pre-production about how they can have a diverse cast, a diverse crew, that reflected in the cutting room, where we had a second assistant who was from a Middle Eastern background, so I think it's something that people are aware of and are addressing, probably not like as quick enough as would be good, but I think it's definitely, if you are from that kind of background, hopefully it feels like an encouraging time to be trying to get into the industry, that people are really receptive to the fact that you might not have the same experience as someone else because of your particular gender or class or whatever. Do you think that's a good, in a sense, I don't want to make it seem like it's a closed shop, because like the guy that my assistant now is like a working class kid from an ethnic minority background. The last two assistants we had were both women. So it seems like a diverse. I don't think anyone should be put off from thinking it's a shut shop for stuff. Editing in particular, more so than other disciplines, has got a better representation of women in editing roles. I think just historically that's been the case, and has kind of filtered down. Yeah, so I mean, I chose personally not to go to university to study film stuff, to do a film course either as an undergrad or a master's. But I think it does depend on what you want to do, which again goes back to me saying, like, figure out what you want to do. Because if you, for instance, going to the NFTS is a great route if you want to be an indie film editor. Whereas if you want to do TV drama, it won't help really that much at all, because at the end of it, you're not going to get hired onto a TV show to cut an episode of Game of Thrones, but just because you've gone to the NFTS, and you will have spent a lot of money doing it, and you'll still then have to be a trainee or an assistant editor in cutting rooms to make that opportunity happen. But that's not to say, I'm sure spending 2-3 years at university just cutting full-time for some people is a really good opportunity, but it's definitely not the only way, or even probably the most quick or kind of efficient way to get into being a professional editor. What it does do, when you're working, no one's going to force you to learn how to edit when you're an assistant editor. So it means that you need to take the initiative and stay late, come in on the weekends, cut scenes when you're being an assistant editor. People aren't going to force that stuff on you. So you will have to do the hours at somewhere. Whether you go to university or whether you're working, you're going to need to learn how to, learn all of those skills one way or another. But there's more and more opportunity now with the internet, and Avid's got much cheaper than it ever used to be. I think if you're a student, you can get it for free. There's a new version of it which I think is aimed at people wanting to learn the software, called Avid First, that you can download for free. And it's basically exactly the same software that all of us are using to cut, anything from Birdman to Geordie Shore. all gets done on that. So it's a much better environment. 20 years ago, you'd have to go to a university to have access to an Avid to learn all of that stuff, but that's not really the case anymore. I mean, mostly just hang out with my wife. Socialising. We've just started rock climbing, which has been really fun. Go to the castle up in North London. Like to cycle to work, which of long day editing, it's nice to just get a bit of exercise and move your muscles a bit, because it can feel like quite especially in the cold winter months, that you're spending all your time indoors and in dark. Yeah, I think it's always good to have some idea of what you want to be doing, even if it's just like I want to work with this director, or I want to work with a bunch of new directors. I want to work on a particular type of show. It's always good to just have that in mind, so that you've got a kind of like stuff's not just happening to you. You're not just saying yes to the first thing that comes through your door. It's very easy to just get into that trap of just liking working with certain people and saying yes to start like the first thing that comes up. Especially as a freelancer, you constantly feel like the current job you're doing is the last you're ever going to do, and you're never going to work again, and you'll be scrounging for food on the South Bank. But if you can, if you can have a real clear idea of who you want to work with, what kind of stuff you want to work on, and then try and it's not easy at all, but try and say no to stuff that doesn't fit with that, you'll find that you do end up just by nature of osmosis, you kind of drift in the direction that you do want to go in. So I've just with the 2 editing credits I've got, I signed an agent, which is a really crucial step for anyone that wants to get kind of film and TV work.
Which agency are you with?
I'm signed with Echo Artists, who've been great. They do. The reason I really like them is that they've got a mixture of independent film, kind of studio film and TV stuff, editors, and all of the editors are miles better and more experienced than I am. So I kind of jumped at the opportunity to work with them, which has been great so far. It's kind of pretty new, so I'm trying to figure out exactly how that kind of relationship is going to work. But ultimately, they send you scripts for new projects, and you read them and hopefully get put up for interviews. And so it just makes the whole process a lot easier than trying to kind of figure out who the producer is on a certain show and emailing them cold and out of the blue and saying, like, please let me work on your thing.